Here we go. Hello, I am Eagle. Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram. And this is fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode number 36. Tonight we have another local grower. Can't wait to talk to him. Ganja grower. You may know him in the chat as something else, but tonight he will be Ganja grower. How you doing tonight, Ganja grower?
Great. It's a lineup tonight. Lots of good content out there tonight. So it's nice to try to catch on. You got my own chores to do, but
Right on.
try to catch as much as I can. I always try to keep up on it. It just takes some time sometimes. Always best though.
Right on. So you want to say hi to everybody and tell them where they can find you, I guess?
Hey, chat. Yeah, you can find me on IG, Ganja Growah, lowercase. Down here in Boston. I just grow for myself. I've always been a grower, but not a cannabis grower really. I got into that when my dad got sick, so he used it for seizures for a long time. He's had every surgery between getting the hemispheres cut, and then he had a pacemaker put in as well. So he really went through the rigmarole. But what really worked best for him was the cannabis. So I didn't grow till he gave me some seeds right before he passed away.
That's a great, it's a tragic story to lead in with there, Ganja.
Yeah, sorry, man. But yeah, that was my inspiration.
How long did he, if you don't mind me asking, how long did he suffer before he found a little bit of relief through the cannabis?
I think, well, see, kind of like what you guys were talking about the other night, with alcohol. He had problems with alcohol, and it was really through the weed early that he had an affiliation with it, but it was, it was the stoner stereotype back then. Most people didn't smoke, so he drank a little bit too much and didn't find cannabis again until he was, after he retired in the 60s. So, but he lived a long, great life. He was a great man, and he was suffering. So it was a blessing that he's no longer in any pain. But really, the cannabis was huge in his life as far as getting him through with minimal seizures.
Yeah, it's a tough subject right here. So was he able to utilize it as, just for seizures? Was he able to, did he use the FICO? Was that his transport method of using it? Was like through a FICO, or was he a smoker?
He started on the Marinol. That was, basically, even he started that when it was just to market US. And he took that. He even had it up until probably like 3 or 4 years ago. He was still getting the scripts, but that full plant medicine worked best for him. And whether it be extracts, solves, the just edibles. But he, like me, old school, flower is best. And if you want full plant, I think flower is kind of nice. That's what I prefer.
Me too, myself. I'm a flower guy. So, when did you, after you got those beans, I guess, how did you start growing?
So that's kind of a funny, it's kind of all intermingled. Like I got into aluminum and making food trucks, fabrication. I live right near the marina, so I'd always been involved in, just boating, electronics, all that stuff. And I went in with a buddy and started building food trucks, and then that kind of morphed into, we were building grow rooms for the rich, and he also had a saltwater aquarium, big saltwater tank aquarium background, so we were doing the saltwater lighting and environmental controls for that, and doing these grow rooms. And I didn't do it at. I still have young kids, so I didn't really want to start growing at home, so I didn't start growing here until last year. But I'd always been involved in the community, just not willing to bring it home yet. I had enough people that were growing. I've been in enough gardens, and it's just such a commitment to do it right. I mean, it really is a commitment. And I knew a few people that could grow well and organically, so I felt good about that. Whoop. Sorry.
Well, you're always dropping, a bunch of knowledge in the chats on us. So I know you're doing something right over there for sure. So can you want to walk us through a little bit of what you can over there, how you do grow?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. So I do. Sorry.
Man after my own hearts with them tents.
So I have the companion plant. So I always do like a little bit of companion planting as well as the buds. I strictly use the 3x3s. I have a couple here, and then a quarantine. Well, not even quarantine, just kind of like an area to spray over here. But this is nothing like purple thumb. Any of these guys grow, but basically just all my controls here. This is just an area to work.
I think we all agree, Ganja grower. If you grow, then you're all cool with us. It ain't a big grow, little grow, as long as you're growing that plant. That's all.
Yeah, it's more than I could have a smoke.
I'm interested to hear right off the bat, I guess, in about the companion plants. What kind of companion plants would you grow with your cannabis plants, and why?
So companion plant wise, I do a little bit of each, a little different inside and out. I don't use a lot of the comfrey or low crop that some of these organic people use inside. I just cover crops, nitrogen fixing and all that stuff. To me, that's an outdoor deal for me. That's just asking for pests. I usually will I'll either grow a couple bait plants or weak plants, I'll show later, but I'll keep a couple of cannabis plants weakened to show a pest if I think there's something around. Basically I'll just spray them with bloom chaos, and they immediately go deficient, and they yellow right out, and they get really weak, and their Brix level just plummets, and then I can just monitor that one plant, and they're going to go to that plant usually. Sorry. What's up, Lily? And then I'll use like calendula, bergamot, lavender, basil. What else do I got? The marigold family is great. Purple coneflowers, echinacea. I've always got a mix of that kind of stuff going, and it's a lot of it's pest avoidance or pest deterrent. I run nectar for the gods too, so that's got a lot of mint in it, which kind of gives you that mint deterrent. If some people use a mint extract, but that is a good part of the IPM. And then using my own worm castings, I have an indoor and an outdoor worm bin, so I can culture the the beneficial bacteria, culture the nematodes, make sure that I've got it in the castings, and add that. You don't have to have an insectator, an insectary to get the beneficials that you're looking for. The bugs come to the worm bins if you're feeding them right. So all that stuff is in there. If you I've got one. Well, right now I got my kids' student microscope, but online on Craigslist you can get a stereoscopic microscope, used for like $100, $150 if you wanted to get into looking at stuff on a slide. Make sure you can actually move the slide really easy, so it's got the two adjustment, but because you're doing more live, so you got to be able to chase stuff down. But get into the microscopic end of things actually can help you a lot in putting the right stuff in. So that's, I mean, my IPM really is like, you know, fungus gnats, stuff rocks. It just, Thuringiensis is like and caterpillars outside and stuff. The stuff is cheap. It's the same, you know, like tonight, EM1 was the topic on EO. That's another one kind of in this family. This is more enzymatic, but it's similar for what I'm using for chemistry inside. This works best just because I'm using a calcium, you know, nectar for the gods. This just breaks down all the Herculean harvest that goes into it. But that's like the biggest part of my IPM is basically just keeping air over everything, and bait plants, the beneficial insects and plants, and keeping that temp right. I think it goes a long way. Of course, I'm going to have problems too, but you know, I've got some Lost Coast, I've got some Dr. Zymes. Knock on wood, I haven't had to really break it out.
Well, it's pretty. I'm loving the approach on IPM already. The idea of the bait plant, I've never really considered it. I have tried at one point planting a mint in my 10-gallon pots as a deterrent, but it didn't work out all that great. It's funny because I've heard red setter farms say that if you plant it, you know, be careful because that stuff will take off, and it just never did take off in my cannabis pots. But
Yep.
I like the idea of having a bait plant just off in its own little container, just off to the side, sucking up some lights. I mean, that's in my book, that's really genius. I love that too.
Yeah, and they help with the terpene enhancement too. So it's they're, you know, most of them, like a lavender is a great terpene enhancer. Actually, all of them, purple coneflower, echinacea. The bergamot is awesome for that's in the mint family. That also is a good terpene enhancer. So natural way of increasing your terpenes.
So how would it increase my terpenes, if you don't mind me asking? Is it just something that the cannabis plant reacts to because of the terpenes that are coming off?
Yeah, so it's part of that whole olfactory the way they plant signaling, I believe. I'm not sure exactly where who to actually even cite on that as far as the white papers involved in all that science, but I'm quite sure that, you know, especially you know, it's the same as a root zone communication. The canopy communication is through that same the scents and the pheromones that the terpenes that the plants give off are also responses, kind of like the root zone responses that you know, the chitinase and, you know, things that you can put in the root zone to create oh, that's another, I mean, that's, oh, I didn't even think of that. So, you know, there's more I do. I mean, chitinase, you know, in your soil, and that's how you get a high Brix plant. Stuff like really good silica, the Power SI, or there's a lot of them. Aptus facilitator, monosalicylic acid or salicylic acid. If it doesn't cost $80 for a little itty bitty thing like this, then it's the cheap shit. So you want the good stuff. You want highly soluble. Otherwise, the other stuff, it's no good. I mean, diatomaceous earth, all these, you know, people use shell flowers and stuff like that. You're looking, that's next grow if you recycle your soil, but that's not available to your plant now. And silica is huge. It's like one of those, you know, as far as drought resistance, pest resistance, it just builds super strong walls. It's like using concrete versus matchsticks. So it makes all the most, you know, all the difference in the world. You know, calcium also, use the nectar for the gods. That's why I do the calcium through the nectar for the gods. It's all calcium, bone grown, they call it. really works. It's a good organic, you know, the only thing that's not organic in the whole line from nectar is essentially the I think it's the Medusas or the Gaia. One of them has a calcium nitrate as a preservative, but even analysis out of the bottle, the calcium nitrate's gone before it even leaves the bottle. So technically, they're telling you that out of integrity and not out of necessity, because testing the product, it doesn't test any nitrates whatsoever. So it truly is an organic line. It's just, it's very expensive to run. And if I do outside, I'll use K and F. I won't spend money on bottles. Inside, I will keep a separate worm bin. I will use every bug in a bottle I can afford. And then companion planting, bugs in a bottle. I mean, having a healthy rhizosphere it's where it at. If you know, like everybody always says, is, you know, if there's no space for the bad guys and everything's occupied by the good ones, you know, you're winning. You know, that's the way I look at it, I guess.
Very true.
All right, I didn't
very
even check
true.
chat.
So it looked like you low stress or bonsai. You like to low stress or bonsai your plants from the one that I seen over there when you flip the
Yeah,
camera around.
yeah, definitely. You know, especially when you're indoor, you know, you just can't let them get apically dominant at all. I find that I can just create a bunch of manifolds and do kind of like the one I got right here is basically just going to be, this one's going to be um, you know,
She's pretty. Look at the structure on that thing.
yeah, I let her go because she's almost ready to flower, but yeah, create a little bit of structure to them.
Realistically, you can pull that beast down one more time and go a full scrog on that bad boy. Holy cow. That thing's a beast already.
Yeah, short though. I mean, she's really short, but she's gonna make some good colas. I've done limited genetics, so I really have run. I've had mixed bag. I've got some Rasta Jeff double dragons that I got in cups now, which I'm very excited about. But this is an alien orange Congolese from obsolete, and it's kind of an orangey, citrusy, big colas, nice plant. And then the other one, disappointment, was this year was the Cookies Kush, Barney's Farm Cookies Kush, and everybody seems to now is like, oh yeah, I had the same problem with them Herman. You buy premium seeds and you have the things Herm, and kind of a bummer. I'm still keeping them around, but and I still got seeds, but I'm kind of gravitating towards something new now.
Always on the hunt for something new. I'm kind of curious. I'm sure you can tell me about it because you've already referenced it already. The importance of Brix levels in the cannabis plant, how to maintain them.
Yeah, so Brix is just so there's the kind of like the quacks of that year. I mean, back to the Dr. Bronner's early organics. You had like Dr. Bronner's was the soap guy, and he was all natural. The Bronner family, and now the son, the whole family is just, they've pioneered this whole idea of not polluting the lakes and rivers, and all these other companies that kind of went down that same avenues in all these different regions. You had Dr. Callahan, and then the Brix Callahan meter for paramagnetic soil, and then it was all kind of hoopla science back in the day. Nobody believed it. My mom's on a farm, and they still The farmers there just kind of they're still tilling, you know, they still till everything. Um, but yeah, the Brix is basically just the sugar level of the plant, and you can buy a Brix meter, which you can buy all these gadgets. I don't know. I've got so many gadgets that I don't even use, honestly, just because you think you need them. But you could tell a high Brix plant versus a low Brix plant, and just inputs is everything. What you're feeding your plant. If it's not getting kelp and it's not if you're feeding the rhizosphere to feed the plant, as they say, you need a fungal relationship for that phosphorus. People use Mammoth P2 or some of these Impello Biossance, which I use too, but I find the basalt, I use basalt. Biochar, inoculated biochar is just great for a home for the microbes, as well as a source of food. Huge, but not inoculated. But it's all these quirky things. Like you could do the same thing with non-inoculated, or buy it and they say it's inoculated, and it's not. Put that into your soil, and it's as bad as using unrinsed cocoa, unprocessed cocoa. It's just going to zap everything right. It's going to absorb everything, and you're going to end up with immediately deficient plants. So it's really, really important to do a lot of research to grow organically and be successful. Otherwise, you're best off sticking to, like like Nectar has the #4 soil, which is fabulous. It costs a ton of money to ship that across. It costs over $600 to have that shipped across the country, a pallet of it. Maine is right up the street from me, and they're great. They just make a really hot soil, so it needs. And so I use the Coast of Maine Stonington blend, and if you're using the right inputs, I think IPM is down to staying on top of it and having a microscope, or having a good loop, or even one of those little USB microscopes are huge. And just staying on top of it, you can with the right airflow and the right temps and conditions, you shouldn't have problems with much more than fungus gnats or whatever you bring into your place. Never, that's what do you call it? Where is that? I've got powdered sulfur. If you do take something in, if you do have to take a clone, somebody's offering you the Mac 1 and you can't say no, powdered sulfur is your friend. Just make sure you treat it and you keep it separate, but because that'll really throw you back for a loop too. But I'm trying to keep my bugs outside. Outside, I have to deal with them and battle them all the time. Indoors, fungus gnats is all I ever deal with. Even with the worms, I mean, I bring my worms up here. I treat the worms as well as I do my plants. They get, basically they get fed, malted barley, whatever I can get at the brewery down the street. I've got 4 breweries right down the street, but the one that I go to, whatever they've got that they don't need, or he's got more of, I can grab for dirt cheap. I buy a couple of growlers from him and $5, and anybody in this time, and that where you need to do things locally. If you do have a brewery around you, that's a great place to get malted barley or any of the grains you'd need for your worms, or just, I mean, that stuff you can even put in your soil. Clackamas Coot is like, I love that guy. He's just such a character. But Tad Hussey does a whole. Those guys are all kind of from that back in that genre where Clackamas, and you had Clackamas, you got Tad, and then Tim Wilson there, the microscope guy, and all those guys were on that Logical Gardener webpage back in the day that Tim. People are still on there, but not as much anymore. But those guys just, they're the pioneers. For 70 years now. After World War II, what did we do with all the sulfur? We farming fertilizer. They took bombs and made them into farming fertilizer. Big ag was born, and basically education went out the window. So basically all these ag companies, ag companies were funding research at universities. What they were doing was stifling it, you know. And if you ask any of these pioneers back in the day, or even today, you know, Elaine Ingham or any of, you know, Bruce Bugby, or any of these guys have been around academia for 20 years plus. You know, they were in the minority as far as science goes in agriculture, and they were really kind of shamed even to some extent as to what their white papers were showing. You know, I'm glad that things are finally kind of rolling around and people are realizing that, you know, we're eating mineral deficient food, and organic doesn't mean squat if you don't have.
It sounds like you've definitely got either a horticulture or agriculture background somewhere through there, because you definitely have a drop on a lot of knowledge. And you're exactly right. I don't see why cannabis farming should be any different than, well, it should be a lot different than just farming, because farmers usually just are dealing with the soil for sustainability, not necessarily nutrient dense foods, which you can get through the organics. That's kind of why I was hitting towards the Brix there. You know, a healthier organic plant ultimately will be a tastier, fruitier plant in the end. Higher terps, you know, denser buds, just a better taste when it comes down to the overall inputs. And if your Brix levels are up and high, not only are your tastes, but the defenses of the plant as well. So I didn't mean to cut you in. You just, you were showing some colors there other than the cannabis there. You were showing some good knowledge coming out of there that you just don't get from the cannabis field. So please just dish it on. Lay it on us, brother.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's cannabis has been a part of my life for a long time, but, you know, growing it, I was growing tomatoes for a lot longer than I've been growing cannabis, that's for sure. But I've been growing cannabis for 25 years. I mean, tomatoes for like 25 years. So that's really, you know, I tell, you know, my buddy Dave, who's a big grower around here, he's got a great operation. Um, when I first started growing, he's the one who was pushing me, and when it got legal, he's like, dude, what? You gotta do something. So my first crop, he was like, yeah, just, you know, do a 3x3, do a 3x3. And after that, I was like, man, tomatoes are a lot harder than cannabis, or at least that's what I found. It was a lot more, especially indoors. You can just control the environment so much better. But that's you know, that's where I kind of started off, and you know, I started like everybody else with just using salts and you know, I always use bloom boosters outside for, you know, everything, even for like, you know, I like to do a lot of natural stuff outside with sunflowers and morning glories and moonflowers. You get one come out at night, one come down out in the day. Makes a great fence cover, vine, really kind of covers everything. We use it to, I'm like a block from the beach, so it's my privacy. I just lattice up around the outside shower. That's the curtain around around the outside shower to rinse off, is just all the morning glories and moonflowers. It looks great. Total ghetto, total white trash, but it looks good to me. I can rinse off. But yeah, the outdoor thing is it's just a lot. It's a lot more work, I think, overall, just to keep everything in check. But indoors, you know, for me, I've kind of kept it. You know, I'll buy any bug in a bottle. Is huge for me. You know, I buy all the bugs, photosynthesis plus, anything. I mean, and then I use the extreme serenity, all the roots organics, end of their tea kind of stuff. I don't really brew a tea inside, other than when I brew with some of my vermicompost. I don't really brew much of a tea. Indoors, I'll use like, yucca, and I don't have a ton of stuff. Different saponins. Like I keep stuff in the freezer too. Like I'll freeze aloe, and then kind of like ice cubes, but not an ice cube tray. But I just cut the leaves up because you can get an aloe leaf for $2 at the grocery store, maybe $3, and a coconut too. Coconut's huge for like $2, and the coconuts, that starting a seedling in the coconut water is, and some aloe. I make an aloe water with either gassed off water or preferably like distilled. And those saponins, they have so many auxins and gibberellin and all the growth producers and amino acids even of that stuff really is perfect, in the seedling stage, because they don't need any nutrition. They just need that extra love. And then you kind of, I'll get the silica into it after the first couple weeks. Wait till it's actually got 3 nodes, and then I'll give them a little bit of silica. And like these bottles of silica, like this thing is small, but you don't need, you need like a half, not even, I use like 0.5 ml. So a half a milliliter. That's all you need in a gallon. Maybe a milliliter if you want to really push it, but that's it, So that bottle will last you forever. But yeah, for the most part, soil wise, my amendments will just be the worm castings. I use the pumice. I have some perlite too, only because it was in the mix that I had to in the Stonington blends. But I won't buy perlite, but it does come in a lot of the soil, sadly. Just the pumice, it just stays in the root zone. It doesn't travel. Like, every time I get perlite, it all floats to the top. It looks like you pebbled your, I don't know, if you use a lot anyways.
If you try to reuse your soil, that stuff ends up breaking down into like a powder that isn't soil friendly either. I'm not a fan of it either. You briefly mentioned you make your own KNF, correct? Did I hear that correctly?
So yeah, I'll do the labs. I do a few different pieces. So I'll do like the labs inside, and I'll do the FPJs inside. And then everything else I'll do outside. So the only things that I'll ever bring into the indoor garden is fermented plant juice or the lactobacillus. And I think the lactobacillus and the SLF is really, I'm still debating on whether I should go and get the EM1, because I really should. I've heard it's a really good product, even though Elaine Ingham didn't like it. I think she's not big into anaerobic of anything, and I don't think anything was activated in the bottle, because it's not activated in the bottle. It's activated. Everything's in dormancy.
Sugars, right?
I think.
Right. It's activated when you hit it with the molasses and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing is like molasses for a food source. There's this whole varying, like Clackamas and that whole group, they all still love the molasses. And you got this other group that's like, oh no, you're really kind of burning out the rhizosphere. You shouldn't use more than a cup per 1,000 gallons, or there's like these two extremes on molasses. I'm not sure who to believe. I keep it down to a minimum. I have it. I use a little maple syrup. I'll use a little molasses. I might use like a milliliter of that, but I rely on my saponins for that microbe food. And the yucca, the aloe, those are better, long-sustaining microbe food that will culture a more diverse population of microbes to stick around, versus if you look at like Tad Hussey's microsoap slide presentations, first couple of his videos on YouTube are just microscope slides, and here you see how he uses a couple of different feeds for it. I believe it was like molasses was one of them, just to see what the diversity was, and then he compares it to his own blend that he uses, and seeing how things change is pretty impressive as to the diversity with using something more complex than just molasses.
So I understand you do concentrate your cannabis grow on the indoors, but it sounds like you've got a lot of knowledge on growing outdoors as well. Not necessarily cannabis, but just growing in general. Is there any tips that you could give? Because we're at that season. Is there any tips you can give anybody for stepping outside, prepping the soil to go outside?
Yeah, it's tough. Don't get into too early. That's the biggest one. Everybody's always so excited to get started. Even here, like I see my neighbors are already planting. We still get frost up until May 15th. And these people are already, especially when you're planting expensive stuff. I mean, you want to do, the cheap stuff at the Home Depot out in the pansies or whatever, that that kind of stuff. They actually do better in cool weather anyways, but I usually just be patient and I do my starting. I'm already started. A lot of it's downstairs, but my sunflowers are already started. Everything, but I can't do the morning glories and the moonflowers because they don't transplant for shit. So that stuff you can't really seed. It comes back every year because the seeds just drop. It just gets more abundant. For outdoors, like I like to keep it on the cheap because creating outdoors, you're not worried about insects, you're not worried about anything or bad pathogens. Nature just corrects itself. It's just kind of like Tanasi says with the mushrooms. He's like, it's only a problem. You're only gonna mess things up mushroom growing indoors. If you bring it out to nature, you put those spores anywhere in a good spot, on some rotten log or whatever, you're going to get a good batch, no doubt. Whereas indoors, you're not sterile, and you can easily waste money on spores that don't come to fruition because you failed. The conditions aren't right. So nature is always correcting itself. But willow, my willow tree just is gone, but willow tree is just a huge, and that's also a salicylic acid derivative, or good. That's where they got aspirin from, was from the willow tree. So that's the origins of silica in some form, anyways. But willow outdoors, I always try to cultivate, just like the K&F principles of finding that tender part in the forest where you can culture some good soil. That kind of stuff goes a long ways. Also, for outdoors, I think the best thing you can use anywhere, composting leaves. Nobody sprays their trees with leaves, with anything. Nobody's using pesticide on most places. I mean, I've got maples mostly. Black walnut. Don't use black walnut, by the way. Never use black walnut. But maple trees, maple leaves are just fabulous. You basically just pen up a fence, throw that in, throw in your grass clippings, get that hot, mix it up, and that's like some of the best.
Why not? Just out of curiosity, you tell them not to use the black walnut. I guess you have to tell them why. Not just because don't use them. I guess you got to tell them why, what the ill effects would be.
Sorry. Yeah. So walnut trees in general, black walnut is the most predominant around here, but they're great. They're worth the lumber wise, but they give off their seeds, their roots, their exudates include a toxin that's basically toxic to everything but themselves. So they ensure their reproduction and in killing off anything. You can't grow anything. Well, I shouldn't say anything, but most everything is going to be affected by black walnut and the toxins within it that it exudates, even through decomposition. So even it's even, you know, completely in the leaves. So if you were to take the leaves, you got a black walnut tree and you were to take those leaves and then compost those down, you're basically, you're putting some bad, depending on what ratio, you could certainly, if it's enough black walnuts, you can actually just, you know, burn plants, kill them. It doesn't take much because underneath all my black walnuts, nothing grows, no grass, no nothing. Good.
That's
Good enough.
what? Yeah. One of my favorite. I'm a carpenter. That's one. I love to work with the black walnut, but it's terrible to work around. You know, it causes blisters working around with it. It's toxic.
Exactly.
It's nasty to breathe.
Yep, that's the toxin right there.
So it's not good for humans either. So would you want to talk us through any more of your processes, either through veg or flower or light you're using?
So through veg, so first off, I mean, it's all about the plant. So I don't sex, I buy all unfeminized. I wait. Veg is defined sex for me. So I'll veg them until they're sex, and then they're ready for flower. I'm not cutting anything off and checking to see if it's male or female. I'll wait till she shows, and then she's ready for the flower tent. I think my training techniques keep my plants pretty short so that I can afford to let them go veg 2 months, you know, if it takes that long or even longer. For the flower, I don't really, you know, I keep the lights up high. I use HLG. I'll use HLG, I'll use Atrium, quantum boards. I want to get the new Diablos to try those out, just because 650, 640 diodes on a board is just sick. Very efficient, but my size grow, it doesn't really matter too much. But I'll veg them in, basically, I start from the solo cups. I go from the solo cups to 1 gallon fabrics, and then 1 gallon fabrics to the 3 gallon fabrics. And I'll flower them in a 3 gallon or a 5 gallon max fabric. Except for this one over here, which I've got in an outdoor pot, because I'm debating on whether I want her to, I want to take her outside and veg. I'm still figuring out what to do. I'm kind of debating, but flower is where everything matters. And veg, I don't really care all that much. As long as I'm bringing them into the flower tent healthy and thriving, then I'm happy. In the veg tent, I've got a few that are neglected right now because, you know, I don't know if I want to run them or if I'm gonna, you know, so they're not super healthy, but it doesn't really bother me because I had a fungus gnat the other day. So I'm like, yeah, I've been running them deficient for now 2 days, just a little yellow. But yeah, I don't really focus on that. I focus on my flower tent. As long as my flower tent is always on point, I'm not worried. And in my flower tent, I'm just using the same things. I just use the QB 132s, a Agromax UV, pure UV bulb, and the Growah pucks, which, you know, basically gives you that Emerson effect or whatever they, you know, just to wake them up and put them to sleep. And I run that, you know, basically it comes on before the lights go on, 15 minutes before the lights go on, stays on 15 minutes after the lights go on, and then it shuts off. It comes on 15 minutes before I shut off and stays on for 15 minutes after I shut off the lights. the last 15, so that half-hour window that they're open at the beginning and at the end of the day, I only run one board. So it's a solo board. So they're getting a minimal. So they basically get the sunset through the solo board and the pucks to kind of give it that mimic of the sunset sunrise. Plant response has been pretty good. You know, I don't really notice them always falling asleep. You know, some don't droop as much as others. I think it's genetics. Some stay pretty stiff, and I think part of that is the silica, because they got a fan blowing on them. But you know, they don't droop as much unless they're really dehydrated. The pure UV bulb that I use, Agromax. The other company that makes a pretty good one is all the reptile bulbs weren't all that great, but you don't need a lot of UVB, but a little bit goes a long way. The geez, I can't remember the other, but Agromax is what I use, and that's just the 2-footer, and it's, you know, $30. You get a T5. I'm sure everybody's got a T5 lying around. You get either the 2-footer or a 4-footer if you need one, but the short one was it 3 feet, 2 feet. Is plenty for even a 4x4, even maybe a 5x5. You don't need a lot of UVB. You just need a little bit. Just you can hang it in different spots, or you can use two 2-footers on a 5x5. But that's a cheap way of, you know, because that's the one thing that, you know, we found is, you know, if you listen to Bugby, you know, spectrum's great on a quantum board, but yeah, there's no LED that does UVB. I mean, not that's affordable. It's all UVA, so it's all 390 nanometers and above, which is, you know, pretty much useless because you're looking for the, you know, although Black Dog will tell you it's useful, and a lot of these other, you know, companies who only do UVA because they won't go to, like, you know, even California Lightworks a couple of years ago, they were already doing UVB bulbs on their LED fixtures because they knew that it was good. And, you know, Bugby's proven it, and I know other people have had, it's not anecdotal anymore. But yeah, a little bit goes a long way. Just to another response, you know, another plant response that has to the UVB light is just lathering on of the trikes, and that's similar to the plant response that they go through with chitinase. But well, yes,
plants, it's the response from the plant. Is the trichomes is like a defense, right, from the UVB, right?
I'm sorry.
That's the plant's defense against the UVB, is to cover itself with the trichomes.
Yeah, correct? Sunscreen. Yeah, exactly. It's also, you know, the bug repellent, sunscreen. Yeah, exactly. To avoid it, to give it a little bit of protection, because, you know, it's carcinogenic for us and it is for them too, for sure. The other thing I do believe in, I think, in the vegetative phase, anyways, I see a lot of people 24-hour light cycles. People doing the 24-hour light cycles. It's I've seen more than one organic gardener that's doing 24/0, which to me it's.
I do it, but it's not for the facts that it's more for heat reasons in my grow room during the winter. I utilize it. But I also have noticed, especially under the LEDs, the plants wanting to be more touchy, if you will. They sometimes want to lock out a certain nutrients because of the overexposure from the LEDs. It's not like you're like a normal T5 they're running 24 on. They're under the LED 24, and they don't like the 24. T5s, under the T5s, they sleep somewhat under the T5s and are happy, but under the LEDs, they do not like 24-hour constant light of LED. I just wanted to throw my little bit of experience in with that right there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ganja.
No worries. They're reaching that DLI, which is that's where you want it. When you can get them to droop every day, that's key. And that's another thing. I was it's funny you say that. It's because, you know, I do have a little fluorescent bulbs or even the 3-watt LEDs that I'll keep on. Those I'll keep on 24 on seedlings to avoid the stretch. Um, you know, because when they're that young, you know, they don't really have you're just creating a fungal relationship. So they don't really have any rhizosphere yet, which is part of the reason. But, you know, plants in general are or cannabis even more particularly, it's a circadian, you know, it needs a sleep cycle, just like all animals. So I think it makes a big difference. I think the science is out. I see a lot of people still doing the 24, but yeah, that's another thing with once you start to switch into the LEDs, now you it's a whole new thing, you know, from CMH, where you did get some UVB. It's a very different spectrum. So in a way of looking at it, you know, with the LEDs, I find that all I have to do is raise the light. If I have any deficiencies, the first thing I always do is raise the light. And that pretty much just, you're taking the gas pedal off of the gas. And as soon as you do that, then you can diagnose. Don't drop that LED again until you've solved what you've got, and she will keep racing. But if you don't realize this, the simple light equals output, and you know, just raising the light makes all the difference. So as soon as I tell people all the time that, you know, raise a light. Why is that light still down there? Like, what are you doing? And I see it here. I go into a lot of grow rooms around here, and I see it all the time. And I don't know how it is where you guys are, but where we are, a lot of people that are in the industry are they've never grown shit.
So I guess the best analogy I can think of to what you're saying right now is if you were running a race and you had a cramp, the answer would not be to run faster. It would be to back off a little bit and, you know, let the cramp go away, right? Pretty much what you're saying there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you just yeah, take the foot off the gas and relax it and then solve it. Most things just iron themselves out. But inputs are everything. So whether you're doing salt or you're doing organic, or you know, this next run, I think I'm going to run a couple in cocoa with Lotus for a trial. It's really, you know, kind of, especially nowadays with the social media the way it is, you can get the solutions. You can find support online. You can find support on Facebook. You know, we even have local group gardening societies, although right now nobody's meeting, but although Zoom would be a good spot for that. But there's lots of resources. And things have come so far. It's kind of great, but I think the home growing is where it's at. I go into dispensaries around here. I'm not entirely impressed about the flower. It's not what I would call craft.
So yeah, you could almost with your gardening meeting do just like Fumdor did the other day with his tasting society, just like on Zoom there. Everybody pop in there, just like you said. That'd be pretty neat. So yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We do have a tasting society. Oh, sorry. We do have a tasting society. See, for us, during Prohibition, the biggest grow operations were west of Boston. So I'm like on the ocean. So I'm like 2 hours from where most of the grows were, and where most of the organization is even today. I think even the normal office is in Worcester. But the Worcester area is really kind of like, of this area, that is like the grow capital of Massachusetts. And most of these guys you'll see on here, I'm not sure, you know, their names or anything, but any Massachusetts growers out here are pretty much all out there. And then you got like Joda Herb, Hota Herb, who was on EO last week, I think. He's out in Worcester, and he runs a cannabis tasting society meeting every month, as well as a couple other different things. But yeah, it'd be nice to have something more local. We're all busy, although right now nobody's busy.
Very true. Very true. And I hope this stuff lifts very soon.
Yeah.
So, walk us through a little bit through flower. Are you a defoliating guy? You know, do you mess with them like that?
Yeah. Um, so the last two Alien Orange Congoleses that I did through flower, man, they were just so. It was just so. I don't even know, and I can't get any answers on this as to what generation. They're not F1s. They're not even. I mean, they're like F5s, F6s. These things, every single one of them was phenotypically identical. It was as stable as can be. So I I pushed it with the schwas the last time. So I defoliated heavy going into flower, and then I defoliated heavy on third week. Um, and I think my I've never I had never ran this before, so I don't really know what to expect for flowering times. But other people that I know that have run the strain were flowering it 15 days earlier than me. So somehow I think definitely went a little bit too far, but my yield was pretty good. I mean, I if I do 3 ounces out of a 3 gallon bucket, I'm happy if they're healthy. And 4 ounces, 5 ounces is killer. That's all I could ask for. So, and I think these Alien Orange, I mean, it was like, yeah, like 3, 4 ounces. It's still curing, but it's at least 4 ounces. But there's no work to it. It was all top cola. It was easy trim. I've got, a little bucket of larf. They're really popcorn buds is all I got. But they they came out well. So the schwas worked well for me. Usually I'm manifolding. I like to keep. I mean, my general principle before the schwas this last time is basically of just my technique was always to heavy on the training, heavy on the LST. I'll snap branches. I don't care about knuckling or even just like you do, same thing where you just snap them over like that. That's natural. That's what happens in nature. So I don't mind doing that kind of stuff. I usually only defoliate the lower, 25% until you get to flower, and then 33%, a third, the lower third going into flower, I'll have completely defoliated so she's got some legs. And then I always cut the leaves that face inward. So if the leaf is facing inward, I always snip it, trying to not shadow other stuff. And then I'll always I'm always fighting with either by defoliation or by snapping the tallest. I'm always fighting apical dominance. So I'm always fighting the apical. So whichever branch is the highest is the one that's getting abused first. And work my way around. And then there's certain, like I've got some
time. This. Can I ask you a question here? Both Sonia Wait What and Spartan Grown and a few other people I've talked to have utilized this technique. And I wonder if you utilize it and if you could drop some, knowledge in the science behind it. If you could. And that's because of the knuckling factor there. They were talking like every inch or so when they right in flower. Like I think they said like right around week 2 they go in about every inch and just kind of snap along the branch there. And I haven't went to it that far, but I'm not afraid to go in there and do that. But when I heard them say it, I thought, man, that just makes good sense right there. So can you throw your 2 cents in on that and what you think about that methodology?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched. Oh my gosh, Kyle, is it Cushman? Is the guy that does the chiropractic Kraken? Um, I definitely will do that. I've never tried it all the way up the colas. I've always done it, like maybe between a node. I've never done it all the way up the cola or anything like that, or all the way up the branch. Um, but yeah, I think, and if you after you harvest, if you just, I always take, that's the first thing I want to do is I take, when I come out of the soil and I cut the plant down, I'm always looking at size of diameter of the inner, um, diameter of the entire plant, um, third node, because I don't keep second node, third node. I just kind of take a measurement of those, and then I look and see where if there's any within the root zone, if I had any pockets of that were hydrophobic. Just notes for me to know, just kind of as a defect detective, like, um, this last run I had the cookies Kush that kind of hermed on me. She was fickle. Um, and I wasn't sure where, what I was doing different that was causing her so much, um, so much pain. But after taking taking it down and cutting through, she was fully developed. She just was, she was just a fickle bitch. She really, she just didn't, she didn't like the environment that the orange were dictating, because the orange were my focus. So they